Besides Tales from the Crypt, The House That Dripped Blood is probably the most famous film among the Amicus horror anthologies. It was the studio's third attempt at a portmanteau spookfest, and reunited Amicus regulars such as writer Robert Bloch and actors Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, while adding the likes of Denham Elliott, John Pertwee, and Ingrid Pitt. However, director Freddie Francis took a brief respite from Amicus to helm the kinda sleazy comedy The Vampire Happening. Peter Duffel, a workman director from the British TV industry, took over the show instead. But how would I rank the 4 stories and wraparound segment from The House That Dripped Blood? In last place, I nominate The Framework Story. A stereotypically disgruntled policeman is investigating the disappearance of a major film star. Leads are slim, so the cop is focusing on the house that the star recently bought, the one that's apparently leaking hemoglobin. He is informed of all the strange occurrences that are linked to that very same building, which gives us each of the 4 main stories in turn. It is refreshing compared to Amicus's standard framing device of strangers invited on a weird tour. And while this segment introduces us to the interesting house gimmick, the problem is it doesn't offer any additional flourish. The policeman is such a stock character, he might as well be an OXO cube, and the interludes between stories are often too short to form any attachment to his own narrative. The final 10 minutes do offer him a chance to shine when he visits the house himself, but this is marred by a plodding pace. Guess we should rename him Policeman Plod. The big climax of the movie, and it's a dull man casually walking around a location that we're frankly a bit overexposed to by this point. I will give it credit for the playfully hammy 4th wall break, and for having the foresight to bring Ingrid Pitt back, if only for a few delightful seconds. In 4th position, Waxworks. Followers of this channel may be surprised by the low ranking of this segment, given that it stars my cherished Peter Cushing. It pains me to betray him so, but the facts are the facts. The plot sees Cushing as another new occupant of the cursed manor, settling here for a quiet retirement. Things are off to a good start, with a montage of the legend posing by a river, and bumping into pesky uncouth youths. The editing reels you in, with repeated cuts to a beautiful woman. It's a long-lost love, of course, one that Cushing recognises inside the local Waxworks museum. This model is Salome, the museum curator's murderous wife. Ooh! The lighting may satisfy your retro horror hunger, but admittedly, the Museum of Horror feels redundant, following on from Amicus's previous effort, Torture Garden. Cushing is visited by an old friend, who also happened to share the same affections for the same woman, and also happened to take an interest in the same museum, and also happened to be ensnared by the same model. The repetition continues from there, back to the house, back to the museum, back to the house, and so on. That's an issue when the ending is all but inevitable, though I will never turn down a Cushing action scene. Yeah, go get him! But yeah, even the final sting is obvious from the very first visit to the Waxworks, so the whole thing just leaves me feeling impatient.
My Salome.
My Salome. Coming in at number 3, it's Sweets to the Sweet. As with Cushing, it is odd again that I do not favour the segment starring the one and only Christopher Lee. He plays a very stern widowed father, which he does deliver well enough, though the material and role are hardly challenging for a performer of his calibre. He's moved to this isolated house in order to further keep his young daughter under lock and key. The girl is not allowed to go to school or to play with other children, she can't have toys or playtime, and she has a critical aversion to fire. Well, that's no shock given her father's hobbies. Still, he hires a nanny to keep tabs on her while he's working. Along with this nanny, we become engrossed in uncovering the various mysteries at play. Why the extreme pyrophobia? What happened to the mother? Why did Lee switch from golden gun mode to slappers only? These questions carry us along nicely, but again, the eventual reveal of witchcraft is somewhat predictable, and the story takes too long to wrap itself up. Yes, the final moment is fitting, but a little toothless in its execution. I just imagine how Hammer's grisly take on the scene would have been, and can't help but feel shortchanged after all the substantial build-up. Taking home the silver medal is Method for Murder. This is a segment I do actively enjoy, I'm happy to say. I have been a bit of a downer so far, sorry. Method for Murder concerns Denham Elliott as an author of horror stories. He's been suffering writer's block until he arrives at the house that dripped bloody inspiration. Soon he is enamored by his new villain, an evil killer by the name of Dominic, to the point he starts seemingly hallucinating him around the grounds. The burning question remains, is Dominic real, or is the author dangerously blurring the line between fiction and reality? Mr. Elliott is the main draw here. He's perfect as both the cocky, impassioned writer and the paranoid wreck. The plot itself pivots in a few enjoyable directions, aided by a sinister soundtrack. In terms of horror played straight, this is the highlight of the movie. Dominic may seem cheesy at first, like the makeup is too obvious and haphazard, but as it goes on, his appearances bring heightened dread, and later, his look even has an in-universe explanation. Finally, my favourite segment from The House That Dripped Blood is The Cloak. No question. It is the last segment chronologically, and from the very first shot, that Billy Joel-esque piano track injects the movie with a much-needed Billy Jolt of energy. Likewise, our new characters continue to add some life. We have a colourfully cranky horror film star, Paul Henderson, portrayed by John Pertwee, and his alluring co-star, played by Ingrid Pitt. The actor moves into the titular house while working on a dreadful production he feels is far beneath him, a shoddy hack job that lacks the heart of what the genre can offer. However, in an interaction between Wurzel Gummidge and Catweasel, Paul believes he's uncovered some authenticity when he purchases a strange cloak. Ho ho ho, the cloak may be dapper as Dickens, but like most charity shop bargains, wearing it turns you into a fucking vampire. This segment may act as a tonal whiplash after the mostly serious affairs that preceded, but I fully embrace its comedy and silliness. The likes of Waxworks could have really benefited from some of this style, seeing as the scares were never really there. Pertwee is not only chewing the scenery, he's punching right through it. He's a loud, crass and pretentious prick, but he's a welcome prick. His humour comes in various forms, from slapstick to amusing pointed jabs in the dialogue.
Frankenstein, Phantom of the Opera, Dracula. The one with Bela Lugosi, of course, not this new fella.
Pitt is good fun too, once she becomes unrestrained by the final plot revelations. Boy oh boy, 1971 was a great year for fans of Ingrid's vampiric pits. So, those are my thoughts. This is a film I always expected to like more than I do, based on its reputation. On the whole, I think the repetition of the house location, and initial plot threads of people moving into said location, gets tired very quickly, despite being a potentially strong gimmick. It's not a bad film, it just lacks the drive that anthologies need to keep me engaged across several different narratives. But I may well be in the minority on this one. Please do let me know how you would rank the stories, and what are your overall thoughts on the film.